Hello girls, here we are with a new history lesson that's about Roman barbarian kingdoms, Europe after the fall of Rome. In 476 we have the fall of the Roman Western Empire, and this empire at that moment was then divided into different kingdoms, usually called Roman barbarian kingdoms. But what does it mean? Here on the slide you can find a definition, but we can say that we are talking about new political structures, often different one from another, born after the settlement of those German people, those that Romans called barbarians, in the old Roman provinces. So the definition says they are new political systems spread all over Europe and different in terms of language, culture, and tradition. In fact, these kingdoms changed across the centuries their size in terms of territory, but they can be well represented by this map. So you can see in the north of Africa we have the kingdom of Vandals. Then in Spain we can have Visigoths and Suebi. They were in Portugal. Then in France we have Franks, Burgundians, and in the south of France we have Visigoths again. In Italy, Ostrogoths that were in Croatia as well. And in Great Britain we have Angles and Saxons. In the map you can see their Italian names. So I think observing this map, you can immediately realize that this is the birth of the European countries that we know nowadays. Because different people living in different areas, as we said, Burgundians, Franks, Visigoths, for instance, they started to speak different languages and they started to have their own cultures and their own traditions. In a word, each of them started to have their national identity. But in these kingdoms, the cohabitation between Romans and Germans was possible thanks to the fusion between the Roman legacy and the German customs. But what does it mean? How could Romans live with barbarians? Kings were German. Obviously, they were the winner. They won against the Romans, so they took the power. And the army was German, because we know Germans had a solid military tradition. But on the other hand, administration was Roman, because Romans knew the Latin, so they could understand the laws, and had a higher level of education. So this can be defined as a fusion between the Roman legacy and the new German customs. But we have to say that at the beginning, so talking about 5th century, 6th century, Germans kept all their social structures and habits, so this fusion didn't immediately realize. Let's have a look to the German social organization. The base of the society was formed by clans. A clan was formed by different families, and what they had in common was the ancestor, warriors with a common ancestor. I think maybe there's too much C's in this ancestor. Anyway, clans and tribes, 2 more clans together formed a tribe. Then men could be grouped into different social groups. And by the way, observe that I said men and not women, because they were not taken into any consideration. First group, the most important one, free men, warriors, soldiers, because war was seen as the only activity men could do to be considered real man, the only activity fit for a man. And those warriors, those free men, then became sort of a barbarian aristocracy, because they started, in the origin, Germans were semi-nomadic tribes, semi-nomadic people. And they started then to appreciate the idea of being landowners. And so these free men then, thanks to the big portions of land that they could own, became kind of a barbarian aristocracy. Then we had half free men. They were the conquered people, submitted people, and they were forced to work as farmers. And then we have slaves. In Italian it's uomini liberi, semi-liberi, schiavi. Among these different tribes and clans, there were often fights. So I think it's interesting to observe the German justice system. These fights were often solved by revenges, bloody revenges. The revenge was called the feud, faida in Italian. But another way to decide whether a person was innocent or guilty was the ordeal, ordalia in Italian, can be defined also as God's judgment, giudizio divino. What is it? It's a primitive form of trial to determine guilt or innocence by subjecting the accused person to fire, to poison, or to other serious dangers. If he could win the fire, we could say, this meant he was innocent. So the result is regarded as the divine judgment. But in terms of justice, one big difference between Romans and Germans was the territoriality or the personality of the law. Roman laws were valid for all those people living in the same territory. So we can say that Romans had territoriality of the law. The Roman law was the same for the whole empire. On the other hand, Germans had personality of the law. What does it mean? It means that barbarian laws, even though they were not really laws but were more habits and used, were valid for those people belonging to the people and not to the territory. One last thing is German religion. At the beginning of their history, they followed polytheism, as we have already studied, for different traditions. Then they followed Arianism. So this is the way they met with the Christian religion.